Well, I was going to say, speaking of, hating people at the top who kind of run things and that type of thing, I wanted to connect that with something. So, our audience, although it's primarily US, I do always look at the stats, and we do have a big audience that listens in Canada. It's the second biggest country of people who listen to the show. We've had guys like Jeff DePazzi on, who was JTF2 sniper, and Rob Furlong, who at one time held the record for
Yeah,
longest kill shot, and of which there are many amazing snipers in Canada. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just that it's a part of the culture there. But what I wanted to connect that with is I hear all the time from Canadian listeners who are like yourself, who love hunting and shooting, who grew up in that culture, and they are understandably terrified that in Canada this is going to go away, because you just look at who the prime minister is there. And in the US, I think a lot of people, just like Trudeau, would love to get rid of hunting and shooting in here. But the difference is we have the Constitution, and it's pretty set in stone of the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I do feel like in Canada, they're doing all they can. They're taking away handguns. And I mean, it's not hyperbole. They're doing all they can to disarm the population.
yeah. We're not protected by any amendment like you are. We literally could have all our guns taken away by our prime minister if he thinks he can get away with it, saying no more guns for any private citizens and turn them all in and no compensation. I mean, there'd be lawsuits and whatnot, but if they thought they could get away with it, they would do it tomorrow. And a lot of people don't realize, we have the highest gun ownership per capita of any country in the world. So Canada is, you think we're very nice and yes, I'm sorry, and hello, and yes, please, and all that. But we own a lot of guns. Now, the urban center, the people that live in the urban centers don't. And as is usual, it's tyranny by the majority. They don't have guns. They don't understand why anybody want guns. So why should anybody in our country have guns? Because we don't in our city. Well, Canada's, I mean, the percentage of, there's hardly anybody lives 90 miles above the US Canadian border. Beyond that, it's vast wilderness, and guns are just a part of way of life. I grew up with guns. I mean, my dad didn't get a moose every winter. We didn't eat meat in the winter. I grew up in a trailer park, so it's not like I had a silver spoon shoved in my pie hole. But guns were just, you just grew up with them, and
Yeah.
it's part of the Canadian culture. It really has. It's what brought us to the dance. So yeah, it's really frustrating for those of us that we own guns, and you constantly feel vilified and marginalized by our prime minister and his ideologies. And I mean, he's not technically smart enough to have an ideology, but because he just caters to everybody else that goes along, that quacks in his ears, he just spouts off this. I mean, there's video of him saying before he was prime minister, yes, guns are part of the Canadian. He just stands for nothing. He stands for nothing, and that's a problem when you have a weak leader, which we're seeing that in not only our Canadian country, but yeah, guns can be taken away with an act of parliament. Just that simple. An order in council is how they banned the last bunch of guns, or tried to. It's that's been tabled now until the next election. If he gets back in again, then we're going to be under attack again as firearms owners. It's not a nice way to live, because you feel like you're treated like a criminal, and you go, why? I'm patriotic. I'm a family person. I've got wonderful children. I pay my taxes. I don't break laws, and yet here we are being held out on this outer lunatic fringe, which that's not what we are. It's and it doesn't help that mainstream media promulgates that same stereotype.
Yeah, where do you see it all going? Because there are so many Canadians who look up to someone like you, and they're probably looking for leadership of like, how do we instill this in the culture? How do we make sure that this doesn't get taken away from our country? And I think there's probably other Canadians that are just so frustrated they leave. I mean, Jeff DePazzi, who I mentioned that we had on the show, very talented military member, JTF2, which I know is considered one of the highest ranking units out there in Canada. He's married to an American, and they, I believe, still live now in Arizona. And I think Jeff prefers living in Arizona because he's like, I could do what I want here. I could teach courses, and he doesn't have to deal with that stuff. So I think, I don't know. I mean, are people like yourself just gonna get so frustrated that they say, I'm moving down south?
You know, my both my grandfathers were American. The first Shockey came to America in 1736 to Philadelphia, the only Shockey, and we're all descended from him. My sister is American. My niece and nephews are American. Our daughter and our son-in-law are now dual citizens of America and Canada. I had I had an application in to get my American citizenship, and I had to actually back it down because of the tax ramifications. Because everything we had up here would then be taxed. I don't know. Don't ask me. Smart people that know how to crunch all kinds of numbers.
Yeah,
They said, look, it just means you worked half your life for nothing. Is what's going to happen.
it's crazy how like the government tries to keep you stuck. So you can't be free to move where you want and feel more, basically more secure or protected.
Yeah. I mean, you could if you weren't in my situation. I'm 65 years old, so I've built up a lot of net worth over the years working hard. But back to your question, it just means that I've considered it, and I love my country. Don't get me wrong. I'm patriotic as heck. I'm proud. My father was in the military. My father-in-law was wounded in Korea, fighting for Canada. My father always said that Hitler he quit because he heard that my father was headed over there. So he was literally getting on the ship when the armistice came. So I'm patriotic to leave the country because of poor leadership, and I think there's a better way to deal with it. And I've talked about it many times about getting into politics. We can all sit here and bitch and moan and complain, but when someone says, okay, well, why don't you run for a municipal office? Why don't you run for a state legislature or provincial in Canada? Or what about federal? And we say, who needs the headaches? I don't want to be, attacked from every which side because, yesterday I used a straw to suck my Coke out of my Coca-Cola,
Exactly. Yeah.
whatever, like someone, they just come at you, or whatever. Back in high school, I, kissed a girl and they come back at you with, well, you're some kind of a mass murderer. So,
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you want change, you have to actually, you have to sacrifice. I mean, you have to sacrifice, and it's something. Sometimes things are greater than yourself, and so I've looked at running for politics. That the problem is that the people that have embedded themselves in a lot of these political parties, and I don't care if it's this side or that side of the spectrum. There are people they weren't gainfully employed in the first place, so they are now controlling these parties. It's not a big group of people that are determining who's leading our countries. Um, but they've got a really tight control on it. And so to get in there, you're going to have to fight all of that within a party before you even get nominated, A, and then B, win the nomination to actually run against the other party, the opposing party, in an election. But you know, again, back to your question, I think that maybe it's better to try and make change from the internally. Our systems are set up well. They were set up by smart people a long time ago to be able to affect change when exactly what's happening in the world right now, or our world here in North America, exactly what's happening. It's set up to change, but good people have to stand up and be counted, and forget about making money and forget about their self and their ego, because they're going to be called ugly all day long. And I use that metaphorically.
Yeah.
You just have to step up to the plate and take a swing. And so I've dabbled with that idea of getting into politics here in Canada on a federal level, and everybody said, well, you'll go crazy but what if 100 other me's that feel the same way I do, common sense, and look at things, with tolerance. Yes, this side believes this, and this side believes this. Okay, why? They're both smart people, but these ones hate these ones. Well, let's look at, okay, why? What is their worries, and let's try and address it. I think there's a way to build consensus on that, or at least if you're a leader, tell the one side, look, here's a big spoonful of cod liver oil because it's good for you. It tastes shitty, and you don't want to have it, but you need to take it, and that's where you have to. That's what makes a strong leader is saying, this is better for the country. I'm leading this country, and this is better for our entire country. Even though you might hate the idea of this, it's better for all of us, and that's not what we're getting nowadays. So yeah, to run away, I've never been a big fan of running away either. I agree that there's some huge advantages being down in the States compared to what we have up in Canada in terms of our leadership right now. And I'm not American, so I can't speak to your leadership, but our leadership.
I think it's funny because I think our audience would agree. Our American audience, just like our Canadian audience, would agree. We have terrible leadership here in terms of, because we don't get super political on here, but we are a Second Amendment podcast. And I think in terms of all that, yeah, they're trying to do the same thing Trudeau is, but the difference is, as I said, Second Amendment is that they can't just, have one law signed and all of a sudden they're going to take away all the guns. It does in states, it does unfortunately work like that, but throughout the nation, it's just that would. I was about to say that would never happen here, but we've also seen things happen in the past few years that we never thought would happen. So you truly never know.
You've got the dual form of government as well, which with the Senate, and we have, you got your electoral college, which also balances that. So yes. They can't force something through very easily. In Canada, it's a little different. So our House of Commons can vote on it, and our Senate is not elected. They're actually appointed. So, and they're toothless. They're toothless. They've never stopped, as far as I know. I'm speaking under my hat here, but no significant laws where they said no. As the Senate looking in on this isn't going to happen. House of Commons, they just kind of they talk and they go and have nice lunches and fly around and have committee meetings, and then rubber stamp anything the government does. So we're even less protected than you are. Even if you didn't have your Second Amendment, you would still have to go through this dual form of lawmaking that we do not have in Canada. It's there, but it's pretty well titular. There's no power in the Senate. There could be if they actually would vote with any kind of gumption or stand up for anything, but they don't, because they're all appointed. So, and they're all good old boys that are good old ladies. Am I allowed to say good old ladies? Probably not. But
on this podcast, you can say whatever you want. You can say whatever the fuck you want on this podcast.
Yeah. We'll try that and see how these sound bites show up down the road, abused and misused. But
it's true.
We're you guys are well protected. Consider yourself well protected, even though you're attacked. You're well protected. We're not. We are not protected. We're literally the whim of the prime minister and his ilk away from losing our right to own firearms with no compensation. Even like I say, there'd be lawsuits, and it would be. I don't even want to go there, and I think that's why they haven't done it yet, is because they just don't feel they have enough of the people to agree to it, to pull that one off. That's just so undemocratic, at least in our new countries. Go to other parts of the world, and there it's de rigueur. They take away the firearms.
Oh yeah, Australia, and we do have a lot of listeners in Australia. They've seen it there. They have no way of fighting back what the government does.